Hi, welcome, and thanks for tuning into the Sustained Success series today, hosted by Brainstorm. I'm Savannah, and I'll be kicking us off today. If this is the first session you're joining, remember that this is a 6-part series running weekly through mid-November. We have a stellar lineup of thought leaders in SaaS, customer success, customer education, and even voice of customer. Here at Brainstorm, we created the Sustained Success series to build a space for authentic, meaningful, and unsponsored dialogue around the most critical and current topics in customer success. This is our inaugural run of the Sustained Success series, so we are especially excited to have you here joining us from the beginning. We're looking forward to continuing the series in the future, and we hope to have you along for the ride. Today's session, Customer Success, Tell Your Value Story or Face Extinction, features Casey Trujillo, Senior Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at Brainstorm, hosting special guest Chris Dowse, VP of Customer Outcomes at Smartsheet. Chris is a 20-year SaaS veteran obsessed with the intersection of people, technology, and value. Currently at Smartsheet, previously at ServiceNow, and founder of NeoChange, a Bay Area user adoption consulting firm, Chris has worked with the leading consumers of enterprise software such as Wells Fargo, Cisco, DirecTV, and McKesson to accelerate strategic transformation. We're so excited to have you today. Let's get started.
So I think everyone in the audience today can understand why I'm so excited about this, because I think every customer success manager, rep, whatever title you go by for your SaaS organization is, how do I deliver that outcomes? How do I do this? Now, you mentioned you're at Smartsheet today. You worked at ServiceNow. You do consulting. You came up with this term, and I don't know if it's your term or if it's an industry term, but value realization. Mm-hmm. Help me understand that. If I was a customer success rep and I just got my first job and I'm listening to this podcast and I'm hearing Chris say the term value realization, what does that mean?
Yeah, so I guess there's a couple of layers in it, but fundamentally there was an intent at the beginning when a customer bought the software. There was a desire to solve a business problem of some kind. So there's an outcome at the end of that story. Value realization, or at least the way I look at it, is really grounding the business impact, so you're able to measure it. And it has to be something that the customer favors, right? So it's either a productivity gain, it's a revenue gain, it's an agility gain. But if you can't actually go back, so you made a lot of promises in pre-sales. If you can't go back afterwards and look your customer in the eye and say, okay, we achieved X% of what you set out to do, then you're not really a trusted partner, and you shouldn't think you're going to get more wallet share or think you're going to have a long-term relationship with your customer. But it's fundamentally being able to measure, the promises that you made in pre-sales.
And what it sounds like is the realization is twofold. One, myself as a customer success manager, I might feel that you should see this value I provided to you. But if the customer doesn't say, I recognize it, like I'm realizing this value, if they don't connect the dots, if they don't have the aha, then that's not really value. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think that, everybody that innovates, develops good products, I mean, they have a belief of, what's going to be the impact, but usually what you find, it's such a different landscape, and customers take your software to places you didn't count on. But ultimately, it has to be in their language. If you there's this distinction of, hey, you're showing up, a couple of months before a renewal, and you're just telling me these numbers. That's not going to cut it. It's got to be part of your ongoing relationship with the customer, and it's something that you want them to own and believe in. And often I think people think, oh well, that's a tough conversation. The customer won't believe me. They'll disagree with the number. I think that's we can debate the order of magnitude, but if you can get something directionally correct and and have the customer, your champion, sort of wanting to own those results, then you're usually in good shape. Yeah.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. Data is the first challenge. We have to have some data. We have to have some measurables. And from there, I can ask the question, hey, from what you're seeing on this slide of these different impacts, which one sticks out to you? Why does that stick out to you? What impact did that have on the business because of that, right? You're not saying that I have to have all of the answers, but what I'm trying to do is say, hey, this is what was sold to you. Here's what I think we have. And what is that looking like? Is that right?
Yeah, I did this at ServiceNow. I think we scaled to about 800 million in renewals. At Smartsheet, we're in our earliest stages of our journey here, but we have 4 different value realization motions at Smartsheet. And so the first one is sort of what you're getting at, which is a telemetry based, it's sort of, a basic productivity claim that people can get their heads around. But it's very lightweight, right? There's no effort for a CSM to use it or an account rep to use it. Then we have a business impact survey. So that gets more into use cases. It gets more into non-financial impacts. We also marry an NPS score in there as well. And then we move into, okay, now you want an outright value consultant. So I have my customer outcomes journey practice. That's a stable of value consultants. They'll go in and actually do interviews, deep dive interviews into areas where the customer would say, hey, we think, we really, we've probably been able to do $300 million in extra campaigns using your marketing solution. Can you help us quantify that? And then the sort of the pinnacle then of it is, okay, whether it's a QBR or some type of executive intervention where you actually then add benchmarking. So you say, okay, at the telemetry level, this is where you stand versus your peer group. This is where we see the value leakage, right? So this is where you could do better. And then you combine that with the stories that come out of those high-end interviews. So when you got all those going, then you're in pretty good shape with the customer sort of buying into the stories that you're co-creating.
That value leakage, are you saving that just for the executive, or are you sprinkling that across with your champion and you're having the initial discussions to prep for that executive meeting? What's your best practice in that? What would you recommend?
Yeah, I think after you have, so if you've introduced value realization into either your sales organization or your customer success organization, you're probably going to want them to have a good 6 to 12 months experience of just talking about value, because there's customer success practices that don't talk about it at all, right? So maybe if you're used to sort of just talking about onboarding and users versus taking the financial, so you let that settle in. I think after that, then you get people that really do start to get comfortable with it, and then they can go into that leakage conversation.
Okay.
In my value consultants, they're gonna be very comfortable with it. They're gonna be able to quantify it. They're gonna be actually able to recommend some changes that the customer should make. But the reason why I said it was with an executive, because it's really a exact motion where they want to see, where am I at? What could I do without spending any more money? And then help me get, more than 5 times my spend in value realized. And I believe that and agree with that. Now you're in upselling and an expansion, conversation. So then the execs are asking, so what's the long-term roadmap? So that's why, it tends to get in more of that exec motion.
I think you hit on a key point on that value leakage of saying, here are 3 or 4 other things that you currently have access to that we're just not utilizing that would give you even 4x, 5x, 6x, 7x the benefit. We just implement that. That gets that trust again. And then, like you're saying, that upsell. I love that value. Double down, mark it again, go back and listen to that part. That was fantastic. Now, Chris, I can hear people out there saying, but what if what if in the pre-sales motion, they sold the deal wrong? And now I'm inheriting this account and it's a disaster. I mean, they didn't buy it for the right reasons. How am I supposed to show value? Like, what do you do here if you're the customer success manager? Where would you start? What would you do if you get those those spider tinglies going and saying, I'm set up for disaster here?
Yeah. So I mean, again, whether it's created by your sales team or more likely the customer themselves, you're definitely going to always have some type of disconnect between selling side of the house versus implementation, adoption. So I think, depending on sort of the nature of your implementation, you do get another chance with professional services often before you get into customer success. So that's in the space, people call that a value baseline, and really that's where you say, okay, well, let's revisit what you thought you wanted to get out of this, and we make that part of the deployment as sort of part of the targeting. So you get another chance. The other thing I would say is we looked at at ServiceNow as an example. We had sort of a 3-year history of business cases, right? So these are the pre-sales expectations, the ROI calc. And we did an analysis and said, if we looked at the customer base and, did they get it as time to value as fast as they were promised? Did they focus on this productivity gain versus this employee engagement gain? We found that, almost 50% of the customers went after a different value proposition than they told us in the selling process. And then again, it's in everybody's best interest, the customers and a salesperson, to not actually promise a big amount, right? Like, it's like, I don't want to be on the hook internally as a customer on my ROI. And then, on the rep side, well, I just want to get it to a level where, people are comfortable. So from a customer success perspective, you may get a second chance to reset. Let's assume you don't. I think you should assume that you are then trying to do a baseline, because what the customer tells you in the selling process versus what they do afterwards, and then depending on how long it takes for them to get time to value. So we have at Smartsheet is very fast, so it's easy to keep in sync. But if you've got a longer deployment cycle, then, if it's past 6 months, that's already out of sync. So you got a baseline again.
I think that's fantastic. And this is why I said this is a masterclass today, is because I'm sure there's customer success reps out there that have said, oh, my manager has told me, hey, this is still an opportunity. You can still make this work. But I loved how you gave us data around that 50% of people had a different use case in which they saw value. So it's not uncommon. Don't freak out, customer success manager. Take and see the opportunity, do the realization, like you said, hey, why did you buy? What were you looking for? Where are we baseline currently at? How are you feeling about this? And then you slowly start to drip in maybe some of those other value props and make them aware of that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, definitely. But I think the thing that I would emphasize is, don't be afraid to go back there, because, there's a person on the other end of this conversation. And, in reality, conditions change in the customer's environment. So we should expect it to be different. And so if you present it, so if you're coming into it as a CSM for the first time, if you open with that context, I expect that, in the past 3 to 6 months, you've had changes in your strategic focus, you've had budget, whatever. So we should expect that what you're setting out to do and the magnitude of what you're trying to achieve has changed. So start there, because that's just the truth. And I think that's sort of less scary then for everybody.
You just connected some dots for me. Like this is going to be my big takeaway. Is sometimes when I hear discussions with CS, it's like, look at all this value I'm delivering, but it's the same value year over year, and eventually the customer says, I'm kind of good. I'm kind of valued out.
Yeah.
I love you expecting
Yeah.
that strategies are changing, and if you're not asking that question of what has changed and what is going to change so you can match your value to their strategic change.
Yeah.
That was like light bulb for me. Expand a little bit more on that. I know you want to say a little bit more on that.
You also hit on another thing, which is if you have a mature value realization motion and you have, your customer success and at rep and you've had multiple business reviews, then you're going to get to a point where let's just say like, at ServiceNow as an example, we always went with, what was the impact of resolution, IT resolution time for the support organization. And at some point, you've got that under control. So
right.
that value stream disappears in your conversation. And so from the customer's standpoint, well, that was table stakes. That was my, sort of, people think of the Pareto 80-20. It's actually, 95-5, right? There's 5% of the value where it's core and everybody goes after that and goes after it early. Okay, well, if I've had 3 business reviews with you now, I don't want to talk about that basic productivity
right
claim anymore, right? I want to know, what have you done for me lately? And, have I moved into a phase of usage or adoption that gives me a whole new front of customer churn improvement or whatever it is. So yeah, you sort of, you're going to have to deal with the fact that, you've achieved something and then, you've realized one level and now you move to the next, and everybody's sort of environment's changing at the same time.
Okay, this is going to be fun, because the next question I'm going to ask you, I didn't prep you for, Chris, but I know you have a ton of experience, so you're going to be ready for this. So some CS people believe, well, my company should come up with these other value props, and then I'm going to see which one sticks with my customers. I'm hearing from you a little bit that you just ask great freaking questions to somebody, and they're drawing out their strategy. What's the balance on that? How much should I expect my company to give me those additional value props that I'm going to my customer with? And what is on me as a customer success rep to actually ask really good, insightful questions like you just did of, hey, I'm sure things have changed over the last 3 to 6 weeks in strategy, or 3 to 6 months. Talk to me a little bit more about what's the balance.
Yeah, I think you want to have, so back to the sort of the 5%, 95%, you need to have, a basic set of value claims that your company sort of drives. Okay. And then, as I said, from a business impact perspective, that's really a survey. So, I think we've done, I can't remember how many, but let's say if you've surveyed, several thousands of your end users in a 6-month period, they're going to tell you a whole bunch of things that you didn't even understand, right? And so, if I thought, well, okay, we're going to use Smartsheet to, improve the productivity of reporting safety issues. So that's a basic cycle time improvement. Well, the customer will come back and say, well, no, actually, it changed the safety culture in all the regions. So
wow.
lost incident, lost production time, lost, incident time is actually what we've managed to achieve through that. So they've just told you something that is way more important to them. So it is about asking questions. And then another thing that we're lucky to do if you're a SaaS provider is you should be able to pretty much, data mine your adoption patterns. So you should be able to figure out, well, what really is going on with this customer that is using Smartsheet across 20, 30 of their customers, and all the users are got CIO titles in them. Like, what is that, right? So you go back and have the customer success reps, say, like, looks like you've got a really interesting thing you're doing with our technology. What is it? And they want to talk about it. So it's not easy to get them to share.
Oh, so good.
Get them to share. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, here's another one, because I was prepping for this conversation and I kind of just surveyed some people in customer success of what questions would you ask Chris if you had the opportunity to interview him. And here's another one. The accounts where my champion is engaged, I almost always win those renewals. It's these champions that aren't engaged. How do I get my point of contact engaged? Because if I could get out to the end users and get surveys and get data and get feedback, I would be fine. But this person's a gatekeeper and not allowing me to get them because they're disengaged. I'm not getting to the things that I need to get to really show the value. I only have how many people logged in, how many people did something this week. I have that type of data, right? But how do I get this other data? So what would you recommend for someone CS that has that person, that point of contact that isn't engaged?
Yeah, so there's a concept of information asymmetry. So it's like, I know something that you don't know, and so so for us, when I'm looking at usage patterns and adoption patterns and value realization patterns, I'm looking at 6,000 companies with 2,000 employees or above. So I think definitely the promise of benchmarking and how you're relatively doing tends to get people interested. That value leakage, promise, discussion around value leakage. That's I think just the curiosity and there's this sort of inherent human sort of desire to compete, or the curiosity of understanding what others are doing. So I would lead with that. But so first off, there's a distinction between a champion wanting to be a gatekeeper or a champion that won't engage. And so the second one, not engaging, that's are they really a champion, right? So you might want to look somewhere else. But I definitely think that the promise of I know something and can share it with you. The other thing that again, I emphasize this concept of there's a person at the end of this story. We've had a lot of success turning around gatekeepers, or I wouldn't say anti-champions.
Yeah.
But if you position, if you're able to give them a value realization story that helps with their career, they tend to help you a lot more and get more engaged. So we've literally had examples. I remember back at ServiceNow, there was a PMO kind of leader. They got a promotion because of their success with ServiceNow. I've seen that same thing here at Smartsheet. Now, in the ServiceNow example, we were able to give her a value story that she was literally putting on her resume, and as part of getting promoted. So I think, the curiosity of, I have some sort of insights that you don't have access to and never will. And then B, what's the personal value story for them? You start there, and that's a good springboard.
We're so passionate about that belief of Chris, of what you just said, that in this webinar series, for those that are attending, this might be your first one. There's a series of 6 that's being ran. One of these sessions we dedicated to just having, her name's Andrea Nottingham. She used to be an adoption champion at PepsiCo. And she walks through the day in the life of what she has to do in managing not just your software application, but usually 20 to 30 others.
Right.
And I love the concept that there's a person on the other end, that there's an Andrea on the other end that's doing all this work And we forget that she or he would love to have a promotion out of this, that they're spending time in this. They want to put this on their resume, their annual review.
Yep.
We're so sometimes determined to say, oh gosh, you're not using this feature in our application. You're not doing this, and do this and do that because, whatever application I'm using, tell me that you're in the red and you're not a green customer because you haven't done these things. And I'm pushing you to do what I want. But there's a person on the other end that if I can help them get what they want, they'll probably get me to what I'm hoping the application will do because that's the ROI they bought at the start.
Yeah, and so again, this brings up another distinction of enterprise value versus individual value versus personal value.
Oh, talk about this. Okay, I'm getting excited about this.
So you need to have a good level of enterprise value. So these are business impact. This is what CFOs want to hear. This is what execs want to hear. Ideal. We're lucky at Smartsheet that the ability, the low code, no code ability of Smartsheet, individuals can transform their work themselves. So that's a personal advantage to them, and it's a productivity gain to their company, right? So that's two levels. But I would point people. There's I think it's Bain Consulting has sort of a value pyramid for consumers. So it's selling to individuals, and it equally works in the enterprise space for personal value. So am I trying to build a legacy? Am I trying to make my job less risky? And so it has a hierarchy of personal value. And I think if the personal value with the person that you're talking to is able to be connected to the direction of the business value, you're away. That person's gonna be a mobilizer, an advocate, then that's more than just sort of a basic champion.
Like I said, masterclass today. Those principles that you're being taught, I mean, game changers in what we can do in the enterprise, that individual, right? Really trying to understand there's a person on the other end. I love that comment. Love that quote. Chris, as we're going through this in today's market, it seems that CFOs are saying, gosh, there's applications that are doing multiple things. Let's cut this one, keep this one. This ROI calculator, or how do I show ROI? What are some, I want to end on this. What are some best practices that you can show, or some examples you might give us on how do I show that return on investment? What are some things that you would recommend?
Yeah, so I think the first thing in a post-deploy situation where you're truly dealing with rationalization or contraction in a spend, like in a department, you really want to be able to communicate a value to spend ratio. So I try not to use ROI too much in the post, because there's a lot of hidden costs of adoption that the customer has, and they know that. So to try and get into a post deploy ROI, I tend to sort of, I'd like to see it kept sort of, well, this is the ratio of value to spend, and if I can keep that ratio, if I can keep a basic 5 times story of value to how, so if you agree that we delivered this much value together, and this is how much you're spending. If you can say that's 5 times or greater, then you're usually in a good place in terms of renewal protection, and sort of somewhere between 5 and 8 is really then okay. I'm on the front foot for expansion. If you're below 5 and you're stuck like at a 3 to 5, then you better start having that leakage conversation, and what things are you as a CSM bringing to the table as options to juice up the impact. So first off, don't get too obsessed with ROI so much as the value. That's what I would focus. And then another thing that happens when a CFO is involved, or you're dealing with a rationalization situation. I've been in I remember one of our European customers, we were saying, oh, well, you've got this productivity gain. And they're like, well, that's almost as many people as I have in my department. So how does that work? So I think there's a problem sometimes when you don't know where the improvements that you deliver go. Meaning, so you could say, okay, well, you told me that I was going to be twice as productive, but I've still got the same amount of people there. So you need to get the customer also in a conversation of where did they reinvest the value? What
Yeah.
did they do? And so in that example, well, what the leader left out of the story was, yeah, the same amount of people there, but they were doing 5 times the business volume with the same people. And so in that example, they'd reinvested the benefits into being able to deliver, process more demand. So where they invest the benefits, so you've got a scale with the 5 times rule, and then you're saying, okay, well, where are you reinvesting these gains? And if you get that conversation going as well, then it gets even more difficult to say, okay, well, let's cut that one. And it's like, no, I remember IT organization, European IT organization. Well, you got $40 million worth of value realized, and you invested it in new program, increasing the amount of capacity that you could take on as an IT organization, and you took 5% of it, your budget, and moved it to innovation, right? So you get them in that conversation of reinvestment. So those are the two things that I, sort of, when you've got a mature VR motion in the hands of a high-end CSM, that's what I'd be after.
Chris, I need to rethink my life, man. You've brought some things to I've never asked that question of where have you invested that value that I've given back to you, and understand that and help them connect that dots. And I think it goes back to where we started. Value realization, helping the customer realize the value you're bringing. What I consistently hear you say is you're bringing most likely a lot of value to the organization and to that person, but maybe we're not doing the great job of recognizing or helping them recognize or showcasing that they say, yes, I have received this value and I did go put this other investment of time or money or whatever over here. I didn't connect those two. And now I just did. And wow, okay, I'm getting this, right? That was awesome. Chris, this was fantastic. As we're about ready to sign off, we've gone through a whole list of different things. I'm sure people have a ton more questions for you. What's your best advice? Again, let's go back to me being a first year customer success manager. I'm just starting out in this business. What's one bit of advice you would give to me as I tackle this new world of SaaS? What would be your advice to me?
Yeah, well, I come from a finance background originally, so I personally am comfortable with math and comfortable with talking a business impact or economic story. I think a lot of CSMs don't come from that background, and they really lead with their heart in terms of caring and being in service. I would say just don't be afraid of the math angle, because ultimately the math is part of it for the senior buyers, but as I was saying, the personal value, the individual value, and another person's at the end of your conversation. So yeah, I would say don't be afraid of going there, just because that wasn't your background and you're not comfortable with it, because ultimately, good customers, they want to tell their story, right? They want to express it. So it's there for you to find. So I would say just, give it a go, because I know I've had a lot, in rolling out value realization programs, there's some resistance for people that just say, well, this is not what I do, or it's, I'm not good at this. Well, it's like, just try it. It's very empowering once the customer you get that customer started, on telling their story.
Chris, we've focused a lot today on that individual customer success manager. But what if I'm in leadership? What should I be understanding? What are some of these best practices and wisdom and knowledge that you could give to them?
Yeah, I think definitely, there really is a case for customer success organizations to point to their impact on the overall software business, right? So it's the value of the CS practice in a SaaS company. The shift to profitability in the stock market,
Right.
a year or so ago, rule of 40,
Right.
growth and cash flow, that is not, rule of 40 is sort of is table stakes. It's more like rule of 60. So if executives and leaders in your software company are looking at where is the 20% gain going to come from in a flat to low growth market, they're going to start looking at the customer success organization for sure. And at the conference that you mentioned where we met, I remember Atlassian CRO and some other sort of speakers saying, really your charter for adoption better have at the other end of it, a target on monthly active usage, right? That's the sort of the holy grail. It's the leading measure. And I think at that conference, that if I recall correctly, and even with the kind of targets I would set for a CS practice, if you've got 70% plus monthly active usage or above, that's going to put you in a great place for renewals and upselling. So then that helps you keep in that 120 to 130% net dollar retention rate. So I think you should be positioning your practice with the leading measure and the the loss prevention in the middle, the upsell in the middle, and then that leads to net dollar retention rate. So that is how you sort of, if your CFO is looking for 20 points of margin in the business, they're if you just say, well, yeah, we do a lot of enablement and we love our customers and the users, that sounds a lot different than if if you didn't have these three motions, we would have a 10% drop in active usage, would then lead to a 5% increase in losses, that you're going to have to fill that bucket some other way. And so your net dollar retention rate is going to be down. That they're going to listen to that story versus, we love our customers and we educate them. It's two different conversations.
So those motions that I set up as a CS leadership, I better be able to articulate or show that it's leading to these outcomes.
Yes.
And then I can have that conversation that works backwards. If you're going to remove something, this is also what you're going to remove. But if I'm starting out by not actually measuring those things and knowing that it gets to the outcome, then that's where I go back to, but our customers love our CS team, and look at all the great feedback they had about X CS person or this CS person. That's why sometimes people fall back to that, is because they haven't done the hard work of measuring and putting that data to it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, totally. And honestly, I don't know. I mean, you use the word hard work. It could be hard work, but again, even back to our story of you put a number out and the customer doesn't agree with it. Well, it's the same principle with your own leadership, right? If you don't put any number out, they can disagree and say, hey, do you really think that that training event created that much interest? Or, do you really think that value realization motion created a net expansion of our user licenses? You got to have something for them to react to and debate upon, versus, well, I just spend, X percent of the top line on a customer success practice, and we just do it because it's good business, right? It's it's the same principle. You've got to put a stake in the ground, even if it's hard or you don't have all the right data to tell your own value story, because otherwise you just it's just going to be an easy cut, easy target for a CFO.
And is that why in your 4 value realizations that you have there at Smartsheet, NPS is part of it? It's not the whole thing. is because you need to have some other items that are more quantitative? Is it because can sometimes the NPS scores be a little bit debatable in being a little bit soft on the on the return on investment? Or
Well,
what's your
I mean,
thoughts there?
there's no doubt, looking at 20 years of customer adoption and value, that there's a relationship of some kind between NPS and customers that get good value. So there is a relationship there, but I wouldn't be pinning my practice or my or even sort of the belief in my relationship with a customer on an NPS score, because ultimately you can be really happy. You can have some really happy users, a really happy champion, but the gravity of economics shows up, and sort of the executives show up and they're like, okay, well, quantify this for me. I don't want to sort of, are you going to recommend me? How likely would you recommend me? Like, okay, you feel good about what you're getting, but every investment in every company, including the CS practice, including the product that you are selling, is constantly has to justify, its relative, its relative value add versus any other investment. And so if you're not looking at usage and basic productivity gain of customers, or if you're not looking at loss prevention, or I would want to double the upsell rate from my front foot value realization motion. If you're not talking about those things and you're just centering on NPS, I don't think that's a defensible position. You're not going to get more funding, and it doesn't remove loss risk in your customer base, or when the CFO starts looking at spend.
Chris, great take. Thanks, man.
Cool.
And that's a wrap for this week's session. We hope you learned something valuable today and that you'll be continuing along with us in the series. As a reminder, the Sustained Success series runs weekly on Wednesdays at 11:30 a.m. Eastern through November 8th. Head over to the Sustained Success series page to register for additional sessions. And in case you missed it, we're giving away a Nintendo Switch to a lucky participant. You can automatically enter the raffle by attending sessions. Thanks again for attending today, and we hope to see you next week for our session featuring Brandy Parrish, Director of Business Strategy, Modern Work CSU at Microsoft.